Hey guys, I have something super exciting to show you all today. It's finally here. I'd open it with this, but it's not done yet. Stay tuned. You all know about the silver play button YouTube sends out for 100,000 subscribers, and the gold one for 1,000,000, but this one's way cooler. Got some nice packaging here, and whoa, look at that. Let's get this out. A wooden YouTube play button for 25,000 subscribers. That is gorgeous. Walnut and maple. Thank you all so much for getting us here. It's been an honor to share my hobby with you all and hopefully teach you some of the things I've learned over the years. I love reading your kind comments as well as hearing about what you guys have been working on, and I'm so grateful for all of you. Alright, so of course this is not a real YouTube play button. If you're new to this channel, I do carvings with a rotary tool, so I've taken the liberty to make this for myself for this special occasion. So anyways, if you want to watch me suffer, let's get into how I did this. For whatever reason, none of the stores I went to had 1/4-inch maple board wider than 6 inches, so I got a couple of these sort of mangled walnut boards and glued them together. I also used this professional clamp system. The aluminum was just to keep the glue from bonding to the weights. Real YouTube play buttons are about 12 inches tall and 10 inches wide, so I'll try and replicate that as best I can. I've printed out here the design that would be on a real play button, and made it as close to the actual one as I could. I then glued it on with some school glue and pressed it on to try to keep it as symmetrical as possible. Okay, after sitting out in the sun for a while, it's time to start carving. I have a line here at 12 inches to cut off the extra walnut so engraving's easier, and I'm using the Dremel 562 at 25,000 RPM to do that. Remember, lots of shallow passes to save the tool and not screw up the line. And I'll go ahead and save these because wood ain't cheap. Don't need all that. Okay, I have these 4 bits since they have potential for the engraving since they're thin enough. The first option is the Dremel 7103, the next the 7134, and then an off-brand diamond bit, and then finally the Dremel 111. I like the 111 a lot, but it's getting pretty rusty and dull, and I think the ball one is just too thick. So I'm going to use the 7134 diamond engraver. I have it on a flex shaft on my Dremel 4300, and I'll run it at 20,000 RPM. Here you can come a little closer so you can see. Yeah, that's good. Alright, so I like to use the edge of the tip to engrave, and I'm starting with all the vertical lines since lines are usually a lot easier than curves. The goal at this point is to get through the paper and into the wood, but not too deep or wide since the paper restricts your view. We just want a rough etching of the letters for when we remove the paper. And I was going to be methodical with how I engraved, but I ended up just kind of hopping around the design and engraving whatever caught my eye first. For the play buttons, I'm staying in the red since that part will be cut out. You'll notice I like to rotate the wood instead of the Dremel, and I just find that to be more controlled. I then did all the horizontal lines and all the curves, which is pretty tricky. And I don't imagine anybody's going to use this video as a tutorial, but if you are going to do your own woodworking or dremeling or whatever you're up to, just make sure to wear appropriate protection and follow the safety instructions of your tool. I'm using a mask and goggles and hearing protection. Pretty silly to compromise your health for a hobby. I'll compromise mine in other ways. Alright, time to get the paper off. I'm using an orbital sander with 220 grit paper, starting with the test section. And it looks like I went deep enough with the engraving, so I'll keep sanding. Something concerning I found while sanding through was this chip out of wood right where the engravings are, which I'll have to fix later. And if you're watching me use this sander, you're probably thinking, oh no, but you'll usually just use the Dremel, and I know, I could do that. But I really just want to keep this piece flat, and I don't want to burn through all the sanding discs that I have, so, I also want to just be fast, so I can spend more time doing doom scrolling or something. That's pretty annoying. Alright, so the paper's off, time to get dusty. This is the 562. I'm just using it for cutting out the play button. Being careful here to stay in the lines. We can get closer to the real lines later with something more precise. Remember, lots of passes. Don't stress your tools too much if you want them to last. It's kind of like your relationships. And there we go. Let's do the same thing for the center section. Nice. Orbital sander. This might not be OSHA approved, but that's okay since I'm unemployed and invincible until I'm not. This is 60 grit to get it really flat on all 3 sides and closer to the final shape. The convenient thing about the glue line in the middle is it makes it really easy to center this cutout piece. And now for the edges of the play button, I can fit the big sander in there, so I'll use a low grit sanding drum at 15,000 RPM. Eventually it got pretty close to the outline, so I switched to a higher grit sanding drum. Okay, back to the engraving now. We need to make it deeper, but not too deep. Too deep just isn't necessary. I could make a joke, but I won't. I'm shooting for around a 1/16 of an inch. Hopefully that's not part of the joke. The spherical engraver would be easy to engrave the curves, but like a few things in life, it's simply too thick. I'm going to try this off-brand diamond bit since it's thin and shiny. Since you unfortunately get what you pay for, this bit kind of sucks. So I'm going to go back to the Dremel version. And after a bit I realized that to remove the chip in the middle, I'd have to sand it out, and that'd remove a lot of the engraving. So I tried to use the sander at an angle to smooth it out without removing too much of the engraving. But I did in fact ruin some of the letters. Kinda a pain in the bunda, but that's okay. I haven't made this complicated enough, so let's use the Dremel 105 or 106 engraver. I'm not sure what it is. Not bad. And I was chugging along on the curves until disaster struck. Check this out. So strange. I took off the flex shaft just to see if that was the problem, but it wasn't. The brushes are fine too, so I really have no idea what happened. But whatever will I do? So I wrapped up the engraving and kept the depth just about the width of the engraver. And now I want to cut out the play button at the bottom. To save myself some time, I'm going to cut out what I can with the 562. Another fun thing, I was tightening on a different bit with the flex shaft and the end of the wrench sliced me. No blood, so it's whatever, but still kind of surprising. Anyways, back to this bit to remove the rest of that play button. Beautiful. And yes, I put a band-aid on just because if it does bleed, then it would really stain the wood, and then I'd have to resand, redo the engravings, and I really don't want to do that. Sanding drum, 15,000. I'm just going to use it to flatten out this piece like a mini version of using the orbital sander for the other button. And then this dainty little sanding drum for inside the hole. I think it's a 1/4 inch diameter. Okay, we're looking pretty good. Not sure why people use CNCs, because that would only take 5 minutes, while this took me a really long time. So I'm going to sand all this up to 400 on the orbital. And I'll try not to make the engravings too shallow. Here's a fun little trick. Pressurized air to get the sawdust out. Nice. I also sanded these to 400. And I'll sand this maple backplate to 400 too, and then hand sand it to 2000. What? 2000? That's a big number. I'll explain why later if I remember to put it in the script. Okay, glue time. I'm using this clear glue that's pretty darn strong, and I didn't sand the back of the walnut, as you can see, in an effort to keep it as flat as possible. We won't really see it anyways. And for the glue, I'm trying to keep it away from the edges so it doesn't leak out onto the maple once we weigh it down. And here I'm lining up the center as best I can. And yes, there's overlap on the sides that we'll get to later. That corner of maple at the bottom is sticking out because the plank wasn't cut square. And back to my clamps. I did end up finding some actual ones and threw some more weight on there. Not sure how I keep losing these things, but they turn up sometimes. Okay, so that's dry. So now we can throw in the other pieces straight as I can get it. And I didn't even bother trying to clamp these since I don't want them to shift when I put pressure on it and drag the glue onto the maple. Okay, we're so close now. We just need to cut off the extra maple and walnut and then sand it down and finish it. 561 at 25 should be fine for that. Maple's got to be one of my mortal enemies because I use it so often and I always ignore how hard it can be. Check this out, I did a ton of shallow passes and I still managed to break the 561. So since the 561 failed, I changed my strategy and got a 561 to finish the job. Beautiful. Gotta admit that was a pretty clean cut. I'll use this for my headstone. And now if you look real close, there's a tiny little gap between the walnut and the maple in the middle. And I don't want to fill that with sawdust since that'll be impossible to get out. So I'm using a little bit of paper with tape to seal off those holes. I'm honestly pretty proud of myself for even thinking about that. But yeah, let's mix it up and use the Easy 544 cutting wheel to get through the walnut. Who knows, maybe I'm just showing all these bits so you use my Amazon links to buy them. Check it out in the description. And yeah, that worked fine. Anyways, going straight to sanding to make the maple and walnut flush would take forever, so I'm starting with the 801. I do really like this bit, and I made a video on it a while back if you want to look into that. Do it later though, so you keep my viewer retention up for this video. Also, they might have discontinued it. I'm not sure. I tried to look into buying another one. I couldn't find it. In any case, now that it's pretty close to flush, I can use the orbital at 60 grit, and then I'll work my way up to 220 and then 400 for the whole piece. Looking good. Now that it's pretty smooth, I think stopping at 400 is fine. But the difference between okay and a little better than okay is more often than not the sanding. So I'm going to hand sand up to 2000. Also, I love these things. They really end up giving a fantastic shine to the wood. Go ahead and get this tape off. And I got this little handle, which has been really helpful. You clip in the paper and it ends up being more comfortable to sand. It also lets you get more contact area and lets you use the sandpaper more evenly. Alright, so let's finish this bad boy off. I'm using this teak oil finish. Why? I don't really know. I just have it already and it's worked pretty well in the past. It's not entirely a natural finish, so I'm using gloves and a paper towel to apply it. I'm also wearing a respirator and goggles, but I'm not sure if I need to. And here's the best part of any project. Look at that color. You'll also notice the engravings are a lot easier to read now, since the rough inside of the engravings tend to look darker than the sanded wood above. A benefit to sanding to a really high grit like this is you can use a penetrating finish like this that shows off how smooth and shiny the wood is, instead of compensating for poor sanding by putting a thick layer of polyurethane or epoxy on there to give it a nice shine and texture. No judgment here though, but maybe a little. So I'll let that dry for a couple days. Use whatever finish you want though, just follow the instructions. Look, you can even see my reflection in there since it's so smooth. Pretty cool. And here we are, final product. Look at that shine. Alright guys, thank you so much for being here and getting us to this milestone. It truly is a privilege. Comment below which video brought you to this channel or which videos you'd like to see in the future. Feel free to also like and subscribe if you haven't. And check out my second channel. I think it's pretty small still. I'm just posting some short, simple videos on there. Oh, and I totally forgot to add hardware to hang it. So if I do want to put it on a wall in the future, I'll just have to carve in a little and put these on the back. Oops. Anyways, thanks again. As always, I'll see you next time.